Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the borrower with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com.
Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of the Double A Team, our very first edition of 2020. Actually, no, our second edition of 2022. To be with you, Stephen Negishi is my co-host. Stephen, great to be on with you again.
Thank you, Ken. Great to be with you as always. We had a hell of a weekend with the playoffs. My goodness.
Yes, we certainly did. 4 great games. It's one of the reasons why we love the NFL. 4 walk-off wins, 3 road teams that actually went through, 2 number 1 seeds that went by the wayside. We will talk about all that in our last segment, of course, when we wrap up and talk about the NFL. I think we have a lot of things to talk about in that segment, Stephen. But tonight we have 2 interesting guests. And, Stephen, why don't you tell us who we have tonight?
Okay, our first guest will be Harrison Graham, who is a YouTube sport chat host like us, but he's on the channel called Chat Sports. Some of the Bears fans might know that he does a lot of Bears commentary on his channel. He also used to be a host, sometimes a fill-in host for ESPN 103.3 FM in Dallas. That unfortunately ceased its operations during the COVID time. I used to listen to him along with a host of others on that radio show when I was living in Dallas-Fort Worth. And he was gracious enough to come to our show to talk about the Bears head coaching and general manager search, among other things. And our second guest, this is a very guest that I've been trying to get on since our show officially launched. He is a YouTuber himself, PFFA football writer, also a YouTuber called the Beast Rider. He is Ryan Sakamoto out of Bay Area. We can talk about the Bears, the 49ers, which obviously is going to the NFC Championship, as well as his background in living in Bay Area in times of AAPI racism at an all-time high, especially in those regions as well.
And there you see Ryan over there. We look forward to having both those guests upcoming here on the Double A Team. And it's going to be another fantastic show, another football-heavy show. But again, football is king, especially the NFL here on the Double A Team. Let's start off with our opening segment. As usual, we talk about some of the interesting things that are going on in the news and interesting going on with the Asian community as well. But let's start off with the Australian Open. Novak Djokovic didn't play. We thought a couple as we were going to tape our first show, it looked like he was going to play. However, he was originally the Prime Minister Scott Morrison tried to kick him out, but then that did not happen. A federal judge ruled that he could actually didn't have enough time to appeal the being expelled from Australia and have his visa taken out. I'm sorry, my dog Samson has decided to come along here as well. But also, we also had him being then eventually on appeal did not go his way, so he was basically taken out and expelled from and deported from Australia. A couple of days just before the Open began. Since that has happened, of course, Naomi Osaka, who has been one of our rooting interests, she got eliminated in the 3rd round. Continuing, unfortunately, since what's happened during the Olympics about her issues with mental health, she has had some issues. She hasn't been playing up to the level that she's been as usual. But Stephen, let's talk about those two issues first: Novak Djokovic and then Naomi Osaka.
Absolutely. So, Djokovic has obviously been one of the athletes who obviously has had some issues with getting vaccinated. I don't want to use the term vax or anti-vax too easily, but obviously he falls in the latter category. He's been out in rather vicariously. He also got a COVID, if I'm not mistaken, and so he has been
That's right.
a poster boy for criticism. Djokovic, aka Joker. It's other than COVID. I know he has made a lot of bones about women's money earnings equality, as well as the media sessions when Naomi Osaka was dealing with her mental issues, if I'm not mistaken. So Djokovic put himself on the back, with the target for criticism when it comes to the things that I just mentioned. And it's kind of ironic that he blamed it on his agent's shoddy paperwork when this happened, and now he faces deportation and the possibility of not being able to play in any other Grand Slam tennis except for Wimbledon. And then chances are he might be expelled from Australia after this fiasco. So this is not a good look for him. And who knows how many sponsors after this tiff is going to stand behind him. But considering what happened with Tiger Woods, Nike, and among others who stood by him, I'm sure that probably these sponsors, endorsers, they're probably going to think long and hard, whether they want to stand by Djokovic. If they still think that it is worth it and they see a big payoff, like what happened with Tiger when he won the Masters 2 years ago.
Absolutely, and that's one thing that's Stephen, that I've been very critical of Novak Djokovic for his failure to be forthcoming. I mean, he did have COVID at an event before he went to the Australian Open. He wasn't very forthcoming with Australian authorities, and there is a possibility with this latest failure of the appeal that he could not be allowed to enter the Australia for about 3 years. So we'll see if how that comes about. Of course, he's a big draw for the Australian Open. Fans do like him. There were people outside the hotel where he was being, I don't want to say detained, but being where he stayed during the time in between his appeal, and he was put up there by the Australian authorities, along with other refugees who were not allowed to really, quote unquote, enter the country. They were being held there, some held for several months. But we'll see how this goes. So, as far as Novak Djokovic is concerned, as you mentioned, I don't think he's going to lose sponsorships. I don't think he's going to be penalized too hard. But the fact that he may not be able to go to Wimbledon because, again, that's a whole thing about vaccinations. The French Open is also very hard on vaccinations, and the U.S. Open. So he may not be playing any of the Grand Slam tournaments at all, Stephen. So that's something we have to watch throughout the year.
I thought UK was very lax in that sense. So Wimbledon, he might be that might be the only thing that he might be able to participate.
Mm-hmm. Well, Wimbledon, I think, has its own standards, but I believe that we'll see if he's able to go to that. I know France is very strict.
Right.
The U.S. Open is strict about it. New York has been strict about its standards as well. Of course, Omicron numbers are going down in New York right now, but I still think that they'll still require anybody going into New York to be vaccinated or getting their booster shot. Whether it's going to be a third or fourth booster down the line. So I'm whether Djokovic is going to be playing in the Grand Slams at all is going to be a big question in 2022.
Absolutely, and we'll talk about Naomi Osaka now. She made her return to tennis, and obviously she lost in the third round. She hasn't played much at all, but she's got a long road ahead of her in trying to get back to the top because women's tennis, there's always a young star always coming up every year. And, even though she's 23, 24 years old, that's somewhat of an old age, in the tennis world, especially on the women's side. She did show some, maturity handling questions after, during the tournament. I know she got lost, but obviously it sounded like she was telling herself that it's okay and that, she's going to have to learn how to handle losing like a mature person. But as competitive as an athlete that she is in any sports, we see a lot of athletes from all over the world throw tantrums, lose their cool many times. So hopefully she will regain her composure, be more mature, and I'd like to see her get back to the top once again.
Yeah, we both would, and it's been a rocky road for her, especially since she had that meteoric rise to the top and became the number one seeded player in the world. She's won her share of Grand Slam tournaments. She's also had her shares of down moments, especially in the last couple of years. The Olympics, especially, also at Wimbledon, not being able to play at Wimbledon last year and the French Open. So we certainly hope the best for Naomi coming up in 2022, and certainly hopes that she's going to be able to bounce back from her setbacks that she's had over the last year and a half.
Absolutely. So the second topic that I wanted to discuss was it's obviously somewhat different from what all of us are used to talking about. This was kind of interesting. The WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, they had a bit of a news this past week. One was an NXT wrestler formerly known as Walter, who's from Austria, and I think he was called up to the main brand, I believe, Raw.
Yes.
And WWE, for some reason, they decided to name him Gunther, which came apparently from the trademark Gunther Stark, who used to be a Nazi war general, or like a submarine general, from what I believe. As our producer Aldo posted the link from Deadspin, WWE veered close to Nazism last night. Now, this was actually brought attention to many wrestling outlets. Now, it's easy because Austria speaks, their country of language is German, and we all somehow associate that with Nazism and stuff like that, even in this day and age. So this is somewhat of a shocking, but maybe we shouldn't be shocked by WWE's history when it comes to race issues and treatment of the wrestlers of color historically. And then WWE decided to do some cheap route in promoting a guy who happens to be from Austria, German-speaking country, into a hulking big guy who has dominated the NXT UK scene as some sort of a Nazi guy, which I thought it was in poor taste.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that this is the wrestling always likes to push the envelope. We've seen in the 80s. I know people remember the Netflix show Glow, but it was actually an actual organization, the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, and they actually had a character who showed the symbol of the South African neo-Nazi party. And of course, it was different in that day and age. There wasn't as much outrage on it, but it was more treated as a joke. But of course, now in this day and age, and I don't want to hear things about being woke or cancel culture, but I think this is something you would think the WWE would be a little bit more sensitive to. They're trying to be a little bit better in regards to their culture, trying to treat women better instead of sex objects, which they have done in the past with their female wrestlers and their managers. They're trying to show more athleticism, but here they are going into this and naming a character, Gunther Stark, who was a World War II commander in the Nazi for the Nazis. So it's something that you would think they would know better, especially with the people who work for them, especially with Stephanie McMahon, who is a vice president in the company and head of marketing, and the women that are working up in the company as well. So you would think that the WWE would be a little bit more sensitive in this issue, but apparently not.
No, not at all. And obviously, like you said, they've always pushed the envelope when it comes to the portrayal of the wrestlers of color. I remember Sergeant Slaughter and in the 80s, 90s, when the Gulf War was at its height. I forgot the name of the wrestler that he aligned himself with, but obviously that was a very, very unpopular. And then there's another article that I also wanted to share. There was a wrestler by the name of Mustafa Ali, who's also a WWE wrestler, who also happens to be, I believe, a former police officer. He began his career as a police officer in the Chicago area, or at least in the state of Illinois. And he recently requested his release from WWE. In case if any wrestlers, who watching this show, the WWE has had a lot of wrestlers released in recent months, or even dating back to last year. And it's not just basically just COVID-related issues as well. So in his case, there was a report that he and Vince McMahon had a real backstage heat argument about the direction of his character. Although, if you don't mind going all the way down to this page on Sportskeeda, he posted a tweet. That's this photo of his Instagram. Recently, he gave birth to his son while he was away. This is what he originally wanted to portray himself as, a sort of a new America. Although, please click that button and play what he was. What his character should have been.
Good evening, America. Tonight, I need to discuss something of the utmost importance to our great nation. Something that I have personally been striving for my entire life. And that is acceptance. You see, despite being born here in the United States of America, every day I have to prove to you that I belong. So I didn't correct you when you would mispronounce my name because I didn't want you to feel embarrassed. I was mindful of the clothes that I wore because I didn't want you to think I looked suspicious. I lowered my head and said nothing when you would make jokes about what I look like or where I might be from. I did all of this with the hopes that one day you would look at me and see your fellow American. But you didn't. And the truth is, you never will. And despite my greatest efforts to fix this problem, I realize this is a problem that I cannot fix. But I can overcome it. And I will do just that. I will do that by launching a campaign for a new America. You see, in this new America, it is your name that is just too hard to pronounce. It is you that looks suspicious. It is you that I do not accept. It is you that does not belong here. In this new America, there is nothing more American than someone that looks like me. So to anyone out there, that feels like a stranger in their own home, I want you to reach out. Take my hand. Believe that in Ali, you can trust. Thank you. Good night. And God bless our new America.
That would have been a very interesting storyline had him and Tony Khan, who is also a media officer at WWE, and Vince decided to go into that. But of course, we will never know. As you mentioned, Mustafa Ali is trying to get out of his contract at the WWE and perhaps maybe go elsewhere. So we'll see what happens with that. But it would have been very interesting to see if that storyline would have how that would have been popular with the fans and how that would have been treated on Raw. I think you muted yourself, Steven.
Myself, apologies. And it does hit me hard, or hit some of us, who are minorities in this country. Probably it may resonate with it to some degree. Mustafa Ali is like I said, a Muslim background, a former police officer in the Chicago area. And he was basically calling out, obviously, people who don't respect him, his heritage and background, and that he's had enough of that. So the New America angle obviously was very, very interesting. It would have been somewhat controversial, obviously, because it would have pissed off a lot of, maybe the white Americans who have come to enjoy wrestling, obviously, way back when. And, the territorial days, before WWE emerged, which was WWF back then. And, the portrayal of obviously people like Mustafa Ali as some sort of a terrorist or terrorism, obviously have been done in the early 2000s before, unfortunately. And then also, like I mentioned, Sergeant Slaughter realigning with, the Muslim character, fighting against, Hulk Hogan, the American hero. So obviously, WWE has always used racial profiling, racial card, whatever you want to call it, to that advantage. And I'm sure Mustafa Ali thought that this was his way of enhancing, who he is, but also wanted to send out a message to the country that we're, the very contentious times that we live in. But we never know, unfortunately. But somebody like him, we definitely would like to have down the road, whether he's still on with the WWE or not, whether he's a free agent or whatever. This is something that bears watching going forward.
Absolutely, and something we'll keep discussing here on the Double A team as we go on. Coming up next, we're going to bring on our first guest. His name is going to be Harrison Graham. He's formerly a talk show host in Dallas, and we'll bring him in and talk about the NFL. That's coming up next here on the Double A team.
What was the toughest group for you to break into? Was it, owners? Was it other team executives? Was it the agents? Was it the players? I mean, where did you find the obstacles?
Well, I'll answer that in a few ways. You are absolutely right. When I went to my first league meeting, I was the only woman in the room. So look, for many of the people listening to this, they weren't even born when I started my career. I started with the Raiders in the early part of the mid-'80s as an intern, and shortly thereafter, also in the mid-'80s on a full-time basis. And I went to that first league meeting, and I was the only woman in the room. But I received a lot of support from a lot of the team owners in that room, men like Lamar Hunt and Wellington Mara and Ralph Wilson, to name a few. And atop the list, Dan Rooney. And I should have named Dan first. This was at a time I joined the Raiders when Al was involved in a legal dispute with the league. The league had sued the Raiders. Al had counterclaimed. I joined the organization. And the reason I note that is these men that I just named, Dan Rooney, Lamar Hunt, Wellington Mara, Ralph Wilson, They were adverse to Al in that litigation, but from the moment I entered that room, they offered me their support and their encouragement, and they did so for all the years we interacted. As to players, I never, over the course of almost 30 years, had any experience with a player in which I sensed any resentment on anyone's part or any opposition based on my gender. My experience with players was they wanted to know, how are you helping make us a better team? How are you contributing to help us win? And if one was contributing in that regard, that was great by way of players. Was there opposition to me based on my gender? Of course there was. Did I care? Not one bit.
And we're back on the AA team. Of course, great promo there for Peggy Kaczynski's show. And of course, we've seen her have Sarah Spain on and Amy Trask, who was part of the Raiders organization. Amy, of course, is now on that other pregame show on CBS Sports Network. And watch Peggy's show. She definitely has some great guests on there. So we definitely we don't we're just not our own island here on the AA team here for the Barroom Network. We always like to pump other shows as well. Stephen, let's bring in our first guest tonight.
All right. As you mentioned, a former talk show host in Dallas with ESPN Dallas, now a host with the YouTube's Chat Sports covering the Bears, Chiefs, among others. Harrison Graham, thank you so much for coming on. Harrison, how are you tonight?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you guys doing tonight?
We're doing well. Obviously you're busy now, just like us on YouTube, but you've been doing it for a long time with the Chat Sports on YouTube. Tell us about the Chat Sports and how it started.
Yeah, so Chat Sports, I can't remember the year it was founded. I want to say 2015, but initially it was kind of founded primarily as an app that you can download on your phone, as kind of a aggregated website where you could just search your favorite team and say you want to search the Chicago Bears, and there would be articles from ESPN, Bleacher Report, CBS Sports. You could also get score alerts as well. And then in 2017, 2018, started to shift to live and on-demand programming. Initially, more so on Facebook, but in 2018 and into 2019, a heavier emphasis on YouTube. And that's really been our heavy focus the past 3 years or so, I would say. And it started with our main Chat Sports channel, which is closing in on 300,000 subscribers. Now we're 25 or 26 channels deep, team-specific channels across the NFL, the NBA, and a couple of college football channels as well, with a focus on deep analysis and entertainment on those specific teams, and then broader league coverage on the NFL, NBA, and college football on our main channel. So that's kind of where we're sitting now, and we're continuing to grow and add channels all the time. So it's been pretty exciting to be a part of it.
Harrison, I know that you're a former talk show host as well in Dallas. You mentioned that just before the break. Are you busier now than you've ever been after losing your job over in for the radio station? Are you busier now running the YouTube channel?
Yeah, I definitely am, because technically that was just a part-time gig for me. Stephen can probably attest to a little bit of it. I believe we met a couple of times out on a remote broadcast. I remember one specifically. I was doing a show with DJ Ringenberg, who I think you're familiar with.
Yes.
But I can't. Where was that? Butcher Mart, maybe. I think we ran across you one time. I can't remember where it was, but
maybe Two Bars Grill up in Plano.
For
maybe?
football, the firing line. That may have been another time as well. But anyway, yeah. So my main gig there was I was kind of a part-time host. I had a show on Saturdays that I used to do, and then I would do fill-in work during the week, do some weeknight hosting as well. So I'd say on average, I was probably working 20 to 30 hours a week there, and I'm probably working between 50 and 60 now, this being a full-time gig, because we're still very much in that I would startup category where our staff is growing and we're growing pretty fast, but we're still a 15, 16 person team. It's not like we have 50 employees or something like that. So definitely put in a lot more hours, but it's definitely a rewarding job that I've been able to experience, because the growth has been tremendous the last couple of years.
And
Oh,
the
I
thing
bet.
is, when you're your own boss, there's no days off, as we all know. But you almost find that the fact that first of all, you're covering sports, you're covering the NFL, the NBA, and college. It's sometimes you just don't feel like it's work.
Exactly. I mean, I talk about it all the time with buddies, my wife, et cetera, that sure I could make, probably similar money, maybe even better in certain other 9 to 5 type of jobs, but I'm just not really built to sit on a desk all day and do that. There's certainly pros to that. It's more of a standard schedule, obviously, but the thrill I get covering professional and college sports is just something that I really enjoy. So it's at times you're like, oh man, this is a really long 10, 11 hour day, but for the most part, it's very rewarding, and it's a lot of fun, especially when you see the type of games we saw yesterday and get to break those down.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. I believe the station you were working for, ESPN Dallas, ceased its operation back in 2020 October.
October of 2020, yeah. So
yeah, there's still the early pandemic times.
Yeah, so I won't get into too many details there, but basically, Cumulus.
I wanted to ask you, what do you remember the most about being told that the station ceased its operation, and how does one person? Obviously, you said you were part-time compared to the other.
Yeah,
people.
yeah. I was definitely
something like that.
Yeah, I was definitely on one of. I was one of the heavier part-timers, as one of the guys who actually had a decent amount of on-air time. So, I mean, they basically got us on a Zoom call in that August, and we're like, they being my bosses at Cumulus, and we're like, our contract with ESPN is up, and we could not come to an agreement. So in October, the contract ends, and all the local employees will be let go, and national programming will take over. And it's been ESPN National on 103.3 in Dallas for over a year now, which is crazy to me considering we're in a top 5 market. We don't have a local ESPN station, but couldn't come to an agreement. And Stephen, as you know, the Ticket and the Fan very much run the airwaves here. They crush it in the ratings, and we were a pretty distant third, and so Cumulus wanted some changes. I'm not sure quite what. ESPN said no, and so no new agreement was met. So it was definitely a shock factor, but I was already part-time at Chat Sports at that time, or I may have just converted to full-time and still doing was my Saturday show. I'm not sure. So for me, it wasn't as big of a blow because I had kind of figured something else out. But obviously for, especially the full-time on-air guys and stuff, that's a big adjustment that they had to deal with. So.
Having been a part of radio myself, Harrison, and been in the early days of Clear Channel and seen the rise of Cumulus and all this, I hate to see local people lose their jobs, especially in this era, and where especially Dallas is such a big market and people love to talk about one thing, and that's the Cowboys. There's always room. I always feel. I mean, they're going to be heavy hitters for sports, like as you mentioned. The two big heavy hitters that you had there, but you always want to have an alternative, and its competition is always good for sports radio. And I hate to hear that people lost their jobs, but very fortunate for you that you had something else on the back burner.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I was fortunate. I've been able to kind of take this challenge on head on, and I've found a lot of personal growth and obviously company growth with Chat Sports. That's been nice. It is unfortunate. I think there's always going to be a place for local radio because I just think diehard sports fans like being able to connect to the people they listen to. So I think there's always going to be a place for it, but radio's kind of at a place right now where these stations, you either adapt or you die. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. You have to embrace streaming side of it, online aspects. I know the Fan, for example, has embraced a lot of some YouTube and like some Twitch streaming stuff as well. And I think those are things you have to do to really continue to excel on the radio side of things. So.
Okay, let's switch subject and talk about the the reason why we brought you here, about the Bears' current GM and head coaching search right now. It's been very, very elaborate, and I do believe it's somewhat finally winding down of all the reports that we are reading. What is your impression of this elaborate search so far?
So, as a person who obviously has not covered this team my entire life, I really spent some time to kind of look back at kind of how the past several searches have gone, specifically under George McCaskey, since he's been the chairman. And I thought Adam Johns of The Athletic, I think him and Fishbane had an excellent article a week or two ago, which I don't know if you guys read this, but basically outlining how every search has gone since McCaskey has been in charge and how they've never been able to align the head coach, the GM, and the quarterback, which those are kind of three components you got to have on the same page. And so I did some research on that. And what I will say, what I found while this search is still ongoing, and we can certainly talk about kind of the latest, and we'll do that, I'm sure, is that I think they've had a better approach this time around. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to hire the right GM or the right head coach. We won't know that for at least 2 years, realistically. But wider cast of candidates, more names. At least they got a guy like Bill Polian in the building, who's a Hall of Fame executive. He's an older guy. He hasn't been in a front office in a while, but I'd rather have a guy like that in there than George and Ted Phillips running the charge. So, wide net, over 10 head coaches have interviewed, over 15 GMs have interviewed. A lot of buzz just in the last couple hours. You guys have been doing this show. I don't know if y'all have seen anything, but it kind of sounds like they're starting to get some separation with these GM candidates, which we can certainly talk about here. And I think that's going to be important, because I still think you need to get a GM first, because I want them to pick a GM. And then if that guy has some other coach names, they should interview those people too for the head coach, because these arranged marriages that they've tried in the past, like the John Fox and Ryan Pace, literally, I mean, that article, I believe, outlined this, that they hire John Fox, or they hire Ryan Pace, and he's like, hey, John Fox is here, go interview him. I mean, it's just like, that's bad processing. So you can't do that again. So I think you're going to see by Wednesday or Thursday of this week, a GM is going to be in place. That's kind of how it feels. Ryan Poles has a second interview tomorrow. I think that's big. I think they really like him. If he has a great interview, they might just roll with him. Rocco Brown interviewed today. I think he's a top candidate. So I think you're finally starting to see the tea leaves here of, okay, they're going to narrow in on a GM and then really kind of take that next step in the coaching search as well.
Right. The couple of other names that I'm reading are Elliot Wolfe, obviously, the son of legendary Packers GM and executive Ron Wolfe. And Monty Ossenfort, the director of personnel with the Titans, and then also a long, extensive history with the Patriots as well. So, and then I think Omar Khan, who is the executive vice president with the Steelers, who apparently rumored to be lost his spot to be a successor to Kevin Colbert, the GM who is retiring, I believe. Is interviewing tonight, or at least interviewed today late. So
they were, he interviewed today, and that interview is already completed.
So hopefully we might see probably 4 or maybe 5 finalists for the second interview. So if you're going to really hire a general manager and then pair up with the head coach immediately, you definitely have to have a quick interview. The second interview, obviously, is the final one.
Yeah, and I don't know if you follow this guy, this Jeff Hughes, the Bears blog. He's really
I do.
I know he's a very, I I've never
he
met.
has
I've never.
his fans, and he has his enemies.
Yeah, he's people have opinions on him, but he seems to be all over this search. I mean,
That's right.
he had it first that Pace and Nagy were both going to get fired, whereas other people said it's 50-50 with Pace, and he said no, he's gone, trust me, and he was right on that. He seems to be on the spot here with the coaching search. The national narrative is that Leslie Frazier's a top coach candidate. He says they are not. I would personally hate that, by the way. But with the G, yeah, it would be a disaster. With the GM situation, though, I think what you're saying is Ryan Poles, Austin Fort, Elliot Wolfe, Morocco Brown, maybe Omar Khan. Now, they requested interviews for Rick Smith and JoJo Wooden, but I've heard nothing. So I don't think those interviews are happening. I don't think Rick Smith is ready to jump back in. You guys may or may not remember he left the Texans because and there's family considerations there because he's got teenagers at home. And if you're a GM, you basically have no personal life. I mean, you're working 18 hours a day, 365 days a year. So I think he may not be ready to come back in. But if you're down to those 4 or 5 candidates, you get a second interview. You should be able to do 2 a day starting tomorrow. Thursday you should have a GM. I mean, that's kind of where you're looking. And then over the weekend and early into next week after Championship Sunday, maybe your head coach is in place as well.
The list of I'm sorry. The list of head coaching candidates that I'm seeing are somewhat uninspiring, even though they have been doing a lot of head coaching interviews along with GM interviews, and obviously the one thing that we're worried about, like you mentioned, the arranged marriage, like we saw with John Fox and Ryan Pace. You hire a GM first, and I hope they do first and foremost, and let the GM do his job. Even though obviously Bill Polian obviously has his poll with not just with the GM candidates, but obviously there's a reason why you're doing head coaching interviews as well. You let the GM do his job. That's why we failed with Ryan Pace, because you try to force him to accepting John Fox. If that's the case, why the hell did you even hire Ryan Pace in the first place, or anybody else to do? Let him do the job. I think a lot of us are so worried, as a diehard Bears fans, we're repeating the same thing over again, even with the Bill Polian doing a good job with these, candidate search.
I think it's twofold, right? And there's reason to be concerned, because as long as George and Ted are involved, you're always going to hold your breath, because they haven't earned Bears fans' trust. I mean, McCaskey admitted it. He said, we're not going to sell the fans until we start winning games. I mean, he flat out acknowledged it in his Pace Nagy firing press conference. The reason a little more optimistic is, number one, you have to at least do some coach interviews here, even if you don't have the GM, because you can't just wait. Because if you're going to do a large, extensive search for your GM that takes a couple of weeks, which it has, well, you can't wait 2-3 weeks to interview a single coach. Now, you don't interview a coach once and make him your head coach. Once you pick a GM, you say, hey, we've interviewed these coaches. These were the notes we took. What are your thoughts on this? Do you want to do second interviews with any of these guys? Who is on your list? Are there any guys you like that we haven't talked to? If there are, let's get those guys on the phone. And I think you can kind of cross check and, come up with kind of that refreshed list. At least I hope that's what they're going to do. But unless you were going to go the Giants route, which was, okay, we're going to run a sprint to get a GM, which they did with Joe Shane, and then go from there. That's really the only way you could do it without interviewing coaches as well. So I actually don't mind that aspect of it. But again, I want the GM to have the biggest say of the next head coach, because that's what the structure is. George McCaskey says the GM's in charge of football. Well, then let him be in charge. Let him make the coaching hire.
Right, and now he has to report to him now. So
yes, exactly. Well, that's a whole different issue.
Exactly.
But my point is, if they hire a GM, let that GM be the main voice in the coaching hire, then I really don't have a problem with the process up to this point.
I hope the GM also has a different ideas and candidates, which I hope that the management, including Bill Polian, will at least understand. And just because he has a different candidate in mind, he's like, nope, we're done with him. I don't want them doing that. Whatever the case.
Well, let's be honest. If you're a GM candidate, if I'm a strong GM candidate like Ryan Poles, who was a finalist for the Giants job, is a finalist for the Vikings job, and appears to be a finalist for this job, if I don't get yeses to the question of, hey, I get to make or I get final say on the head coach, I'm not taking this job.
Oh yeah,
because I've seen what's happened over the last decade. I mean, so I think certain GM candidates might be picky. It's possible Ed Dodds pulled out because he didn't like the structure. Now, he's done that before, and there were there's some stories that have come out about him, how he's kind of an abrasive guy, whatever, but he was a guy I like quite a bit as a candidate. So,
sure.
We'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm also very aware that we've been down this road before with the Chicago Bears. So I do think it's a big week, though. I think something will happen this week on the GM front, and we'll see on the coaching front potentially this week as well.
Who's your GM? Who do you think is a GM if you had to pick one now?
I did a prediction on my Bears video Monday. Yeah. Because people in my DMs, we haven't heard a prediction for you. Okay, I'll make a prediction. Because I hadn't done so because there's really not a ton of, until yesterday and today, a lot of, momentum in any direction. I just took a guess, Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus as the combination. They seem to like Eberflus. I've read that Poles likes him as well. I've also read that Poles likes Brian Flores and Dan Quinn. So those are two other potential names. We read earlier today that Dan Quinn and Jim Caldwell are expected to get second interviews on the coaching side. We already know that Eberflus is. So I hope those aren't just the three finalists. But, I think Flores is an interesting name if they end up going with Poles, who, well, if you get someone from the Chiefs organization, you're not going to about it. I mean, they've built a juggernaut there. So I think Poles would be a pretty strong hire if he's the guy.
Right. I think a lot of Bears are a little skittish because of the Chiefs. What happened with Matt Nagy as the head coach previously?
Sure.
And,
yeah.
And then the name Ryan, obviously with the P pace.
Ryan and Matt, it could happen.
They're making it so whatever they can throw at that, they're like again. So. We'll wait and see. Absolutely. We're going to have to keep our fingers crossed. And obviously, the candidates for GM, obviously, we should know in a few days. And then let's hope that GM obviously picks the right head coach. Hopefully more than what we are reading on the the internet right now with the candidates.
I hope Brian Dable gets a further look. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of buzz on that front, but I think he at least should get a second interview. But that's
who?
Just me.
Brian Day?
Brian Dable.
Oh, Brian Dable. Yes. I think
OC.
he's the number one candidate for many Bears fans right now. We want offense. We saw what happened with the yesterday's game, and I think a lot of questions about it's the quarterback, it's the the play caller who, with an experience like Dable, he can certainly a good coach obviously can adjust to his personnel, which something that Matt Nagy failed miserably.
Yeah.
And we all know that, and we don't want repeat of the same thing happening. And then at least Brian Dable, he worked in college with Nick Saban. He worked under Bill Belichick. And I just hope that he does have in him that he wants to do a second interview, because he would rather work with Justin Fields than, say, Daniel Jones or whoever the rookie quarterback they decided to do with the one of the Bears picks that the Bears gave up to the Giants for Justin Fields last year. So
the reason I like Dable is because I think he's learned over time, and he has a ton of experience as a play caller. And you look at Josh Allen's just year by year development. I mean, sure, he's an alien. He's a freak talent, but doesn't Dable deserve some credit there? I mean, he couldn't complete 50% of his passes basically in college. And he's become this just superstar, just mobile, strong arm. He had all this physical talent, but I think Dable's helped rein it in and has helped give him that confidence. Sure, I mean, you got to have the talent in the first place, but I think we all feel like Fields has that type of talent. Maybe not quite to that level, but you just need the right guy. And I think you made a good point. What Matt Nagy was just so bad at is that he wanted to force his scheme onto his personnel. And good coaches don't do that. They understand the personnel that they have, and they build their scheme around it. And I think Dable's done exactly that. He understands that Josh Allen's a good runner, so he runs a lot of QB power. He has a strong arm, so there's a vertical and deep crossing passing attack. And, some Bears fans say, well, I don't like the fact that he doesn't run the with David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. You certainly wouldn't want to do that here. And my counter would be, well, the Bills don't have very good running backs, and their blockers they don't have a good run block unit up front. So I think he's understanding, hey, this is our strength. So let's just build it all around Josh Allen. And it's worked pretty darn well the last couple of years, I would say. So
the one thing we can say, Harrison, and we're speaking with Harrison Graham, one of the hosts of the Chat Sports on YouTube, and you can go to their channel over there on YouTube as well. At least the NFL teams are this time around are taking their time. They're not rushing into hires that we have seen in the past that have been so disastrous, especially with the Bears situation, with the forced marriage, as you talked about. We're seeing them taking their time and doing, at least I'm hoping, their due diligence.
I mean, it seems that way, right? It's kind of crazy. We're 2 weeks since Black Monday, the infamous term of when coaches get fired, and 8 jobs are open now, and no team has hired a head coach. I mean, that's pretty surprising.
Sure.
Now, a lot of top candidates out there just became fully available with the Bucs losing. You've got Leftwich and Todd Bowles, which, by the way, Todd Bowles, I think he lost some points running a cover zero blitz with 20 seconds left or whatever against the Rams. I don't know what that was all about. But Leftwich available too. And then, of course, with Nathaniel Hackett with the Packers. He's a guy that's interviewed with some teams. They're obviously out of the playoffs. And then also Buffalo with Dable and Frazier as some guys who have interviewed as well. So I do think you'll see teams, you'll see more movement this week and on into next week. I think all 8 of these teams will have their GM coach combos in place. Not all of them have GM openings, but before the Super Bowl for sure, I think all these openings will be filled. So I think in the next 3 to 5 days, you'll see a lot of movement across the NFL. Obviously, I think teams are waiting to see if Jim Harbaugh or Sean Payton are viable options. I think Harbaugh is kind of the biggest wild card right now because he's got to figure out what he wants to do, and that could play with the Bears as well. So I think that's something to monitor this week.
And we're going to be watching it all, and we'll be watching you, Harrison, especially. You'll be watching it all on your channels as well. So it's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks heading into the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Harrison Graham, one of the hosts on Chat Sport on YouTube. We thank you very much for coming on with us, and we'll speak to you again down the road.
All right, guys, let's do it again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Harrison. Thank you. We'll see you again soon.
All right.
And
thanks.
coming up, we'll be speaking with Ryan Sakamoto next on the AA team on the Barroom Network.
Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com.
Back on the AA team, we thank Harrison. Graham of the one of the hosts of Chat Sport on YouTube for being our first guest tonight on the AA team. Let's bring in our second guest. Let's bring him right on in. We continue to talk about the NFL. He is Ryan Sakamoto, writer extraordinaire, also covering the NFL, joining us from the left coast in San Francisco in the Bay Area. We'll talk to him about what's going on with the 49ers. They're in a big game, we heard. A big win, especially, and over a team in the Midwest that Stephen Negishi really, really hates. So out of that, and we'll talk about the big rivalry between the Niners and the Rams coming up. Ryan, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Hey,
Thank you, Ryan.
Ryan, let's talk a little bit about the team that's in the Bay Area for you. The Niners, they seem to have the Packers' number, especially in the playoffs, even with a quarterback and a game in which they didn't play particularly well. They stepped up. The special teams did what they had to do, and they played and made the plays when they had to, and now they're in the NFC Championship against a team in which they also have their number as well.
Right. Yeah, you hit it on the nail, and that's part of the analysis that I broke down going into that game is, the funny thing on Twitter, and I just want to point this out because I think everybody takes things out of context, but then again, they go back on their word. Look, everyone can say Jimmy Garoppolo is a game manager. I would be the first to tell you he's a game manager, right? But then when the same people say, well, wins and losses aren't part of a quarterback's record because you have an established running game, you have a strong defense, well, then they go out and say, well, Aaron Rodgers is 0-3 against the 49ers in the playoffs. So it's kind of like you're contradicting yourself. So I just want to put that out there because, again, it does mean something. I think when you have a team or you face a team in the playoffs and you lose 3 times going into it for the 4th time, in the back of your head, you're always wondering, can I get over the hump against this stupid team? Like, this team always beats us, and for whatever reason, it happened again. Now, you can blame whoever you want to blame for it, but like I said, the special teams was special, right? And it came down to special teams. The win percentage before that blocked punt was 10% by Next Gen Stats. So when you take that probability rate and then you double down on that with the missed field goal right before halftime, I mean, that came down to special teams. Yes, it came down to the defense, but I think the snow had a negative impact on the Green Bay Packers. I think it hurt them more than helped them because at the end of the day, you saw Devontae Adams. He really couldn't get a free release off the line of scrimmage. His footing was kind of off. And so you saw in that deep throw later in the football game, if that was on a clean surface, Devontae Adams would have at least a half a step on that boundary cornerback, and then that would possibly been a game-changing play. What happened was it was all for naught, and I think the snow conditions actually hurt the Green Bay Packers rather than helped them. I don't care, they're built for this because they played in the cold. Well, no, how many times did it snow in Green Bay? And every team has its own identity. As you guys know, you guys are the Chicago Bears. A lot of turnovers are going to happen, and so each team has its own identity. So to say that one team is built for it when they're really not, because each year has its own identity, you're really missing the point of exactly what really went down in Green Bay.
Exactly, and you take a look at the Packers games. I think they had maybe about one game that maybe snowed during the season. So you're absolutely your point is very well taken, Ryan.
Yeah, and again, you talk about and how he doubled down on those gains going into the NFC Championship game. Look, I put some tweets out, and let's face it, Sean McVay is basically a quote unquote loser when it comes to facing Kyle Shanahan in his last 6 games. He's 0-6. That's not good. And then when you take that again, the same exact, hey man, this team has my number or this coach has my number, same effect is happening. You look at NFL trends, right? We talk about rivalry renewed. Green Bay Packers are your rival, right? But that rivalry hasn't really been there for a number of years now. Same with the Minnesota Vikings. But when you look at the San Francisco 49ers, rivalry renewed, right? Wild card game, Dallas Cowboys, rivalry renewed. When's the last time they played? 1994. Double down on that, going into the next round, in the divisional round, rivalry renewed. Green Bay Packers, they beat the Green Bay Packers. Now, again, it's the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Rivalry renewed. The Los Angeles Rams, the last time they played in the NFC Championship game was back in 1989. And that year at Candlestick Park, they beat the LA Rams at Candlestick to go on and win the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are also playing in the AFC Championship game and played them twice. So if you look throughout history, I'm very analytical about this. There's trends. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen or it is going to happen. I'm just saying look at the trends, right? So it's really interesting when you can kind of put pieces to a puzzle together and then kind of formulate your analysis off of that, because history is history for a reason. We should learn from our history because at the end of the day, it tells us something. It tells us something.
History repeats itself. Yes, we know the hearing, of course. So going into the game, were you confident at all, or were you like, boy, this is going to be where San Francisco meet its match?
I thought the Packers would win. I have a pregame show with Randy Cross, and it's called Don't Cross the Beast Empire, and we talked about it. Randy picked the Niners straight up. I said, you know what? It's going to come down to the final possession. Whether a Packers fan or a Niner, it's going to come down to the final possession. I thought at the end of the day, it would be in the hands of Jimmy Garoppolo to not only get them in field goal range, I thought they had to go and get a touchdown. That was my pregame analysis is, look, we know what Jimmy can't do. He can't throw the ball. We know that. Like, he's not very consistent in throwing the ball when it counts. That's just a fact. He doesn't learn to live to play another down. My thinking was, okay, Aaron Rodgers is going to be Aaron Rodgers, which he wasn't, but I thought they were going to score late. They'd go up by 4 points, and then Jimmy Garoppolo would have to score a touchdown to win it. That didn't play out that way. And then here the Niners are, who, let's face it, they were beaten in all 2 phases of the game outside of special teams. So in a game where people are saying, oh, the Niners got lucky, that's still a 3rd phase of the game, and that's why they play the game. Because, again, when you look into the draft, which you guys are going to be doing, right, and you're looking for a kicker or you're looking for a long snapper, people laugh at drafting these guys in the 6th, 7th round, but you look at guys like, let's take a look at Sebastian Janikowski. Would I have taken a kicker in the 1st round? No, but when you put it in for how should I say this? For what it's worth, it really means something. I mean, Trent Baalke drafted 5th round pick Bradley Pinion out of Clemson, and people here in the Bay Area, me being a beat writer, were all scoffing at, like, why would you take a punter in the 5th round? Like, you can get one off the street. But here, Bradley Pinion is still playing his career in Tampa and doing fairly well outside of the game that we just witnessed. So I think that people overlook the minute details to an NFL game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the last thing you want to do, because at the end of the day, as you guys know, you guys have Jakeem Grant. If you guys didn't have Jakeem Grant, field position would not be as good as what it is when you start your drive. So that's why I always tell people, look, it comes down to 3 phases of football. You can't have 2 or 2.5 and expect to win. You have to win in all 3 phases and be sound and fundamentally sound in all 3 phases.
That's true. The fact is that the Bears fans always know about Robbie Gould and all that stuff. And here he is in San Francisco getting the kick that takes him to the NFC Championship.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I covered him during my time as a beat writer at the Niners. Good guy. He really is a good guy. Really cool to talk to. Really open and good with the media. So.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, we still miss Robbie Gould. He was, they don't say good as gold for nothing, and the Bears fans will always remember him for being one of the all-time great Bears. What is the future with Jimmy G? Is he playing for his position, not just with the Niners, but also with the teams that needs quarterbacks out there, like Cleveland and maybe the Giants and among others?
Absolutely. I said it before the year began. And what I was hearing is, this is the last dance. Remember during COVID, Chicago Bulls had that last dance on Netflix, and everyone's talking about the last dance. And then now it's talking about Aaron Rodgers' last dance and how this is Tom Brady's last dance now. But it was funny because John Lynch said, oh, we're going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo for 1 more year. And so every time I would go on YouTube, I'd be like, oh, we have Jimmy Garoppolo for 1 more year. The problem that we're having now is this guy, again, we're using that quarterback stat line of him. If he gets it done, if they reach the Super Bowl, that's your starting quarterback. I don't care who it is, going to 2 Super Bowls in the last 3 years. How many quarterbacks can say that? Only Pat Mahomes, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying he's on Pat Mahomes' level. I'm not. In fact, I would say Jimmy Garoppolo, you're basically shortening your game plan because there are limitations to his game. But what I can say, he does just enough to not screw it up, and you can still win with that formula. So there's no way, in my opinion, that you can roll with Trey Lance next year simply because of what Jimmy Garoppolo is doing. And if you want to talk about trade value, you hear about Adam Schefter. Oh, he's just auditioning for the other 31 teams. Well, no crap. Obviously, he's doing that because if you're Jimmy Garoppolo, this is your last go around and you know it, you have to go with the mindset and be mentally tough because at the end of the day, the Bay Area media, just like the Chicago media, we're all over you. We're all over you. I mean, he has so much gray and white hair on his head right now because of all the rumors surrounding 1 foot out the door. And so for him to come back and play at this high level really says and speaks volumes about who he is as a person, who he is as a professional, both on and off the football field, but more importantly, how he can maintain poise, right? From the quarterback position, both on and off, how he maintains his poise, because everyone trolls him on Twitter. You guys are on Twitter. We see it. Like, he gets trolled all the time. And for him to just go out there and still get it done and have the team, like George Kittle, on his back, writing, not writing him, but writing for him, like having his back, I should say, it speaks volume to who he is. And I think that's going to be a huge, huge plus for a team like, I don't know, like the teams you just mentioned, who may be looking for a quarterback as a stopgap or a bridge gap player.
Ryan, Trey Lance is supposed to be the heir apparent. I know he was in for some trick plays throughout the season to run the Wildcat, to run certain plays, but does he have that je ne sais quoi that other quarterbacks like that held the position for the Niners? Does he have that what you've seen so far?
From what I've seen and what I've been hearing, look, he has the potential to be the best quarterback to come out of this draft class, potentially. Mm-hmm. But potential doesn't mean crap if you don't live up to the hype, right? There's a lot of players who have potential that don't live up to the hype, right? Where's Leonard Floyd? I mean, Ryan Pace was like, oh man, we like this guy. He has a long wingspan, arm length. He has a height, weight, speed that we like off the edge. Where is he, right? He didn't do so well. That's why he's now playing for the LA Rams, right? You're like, oh, nah, man, we don't need this guy. We can do better off and hear you guys having Robert Quinn and so forth. But potentially, yes. But I don't see enough of that potential. My man, Randy Mueller, former GM in the NFL, 2000 GM of the Year with the Saints, who's with the Seattle Seahawks and Miami Dolphins and worked with Saban. This guy knows his stuff. He was on the show, and he was told by one well-respected current GM, Trey Lance is a year away from being away, meaning he's not even on Justin Fields' level. He's way beyond that. Because, again, if you look at the production of body of work, he only played in that one college game because of COVID. And then all of a sudden you're drafting a guy. And I talked about this before he was even drafted by the San Francisco 49ers. I said, look, when you try to project talent, right? Because that's what our job as insider analysts are, or whatever the case may be. There's different layers of the onion to really get to the core. When you take a prospect, you can look at the critical factors, you can look at the traits. But then again, you have to compare that to the level of competition, right? We have the Senior Bowl coming up, but Trey Lance never got the opportunity because, one, he plays in the FCS, and he's not facing defenses that you would face in a Power 5 conference, let alone the SEC, and then let alone the NFL level. So that's 4 layers right there that we're talking about. And when people say, oh, this guy's smart, he gets it. Look, he doesn't have to face a robber scheme in a cover 1. He doesn't have to face a cover 1 with a whole player. He doesn't have to face with inverted coverages on the back end, or a quarter half coverage that you see with Nick Saban and the rules of engagement on the back end. I mean, those are layers that you really have to look into. And to be honest with you, let's face it, if he was ready, he would be starting right now, because Kyle Shanahan gave him more than enough opportunities to see the sample size that he pulled from when Jimmy Garoppolo was quote unquote hurt, to see what they really had. And he's just not ready. Not saying he's not going to be good, not saying he's not going to be a Pro Bowl player, but give me Justin Fields over Trey Lance right now, any day of the week. I like Justin Fields, by the way. He's a great player.
Well, you covered the Bears also on your website as well. And I also wanted to touch bases about the current Bears GM and head coaching search right now. We had Harrison Graham from Chat Sport earlier. He said that the current extensive search is he liked what he's seeing right now. What are your thoughts on the current search and the current favorites that is being mentioned on the internet right now?
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? And no one wants to talk about this, but I'll talk about it because it is a problem. There's two N words that we often associate ourselves, or not. We should not. I'm not saying like us, like we associate, but the NFL, right? The NFL. There's two N words that I'm going to talk about that no one wants to talk about. It's narcissism and nepotism. All right. Narcissism and nepotism. It's not what you know, it's who you know a lot of times.
Right.
So there's a lot of personal agendas within these NFL teams to protect their personal agendas because they have friends or family members and they will just get the job with an in-house. You ever notice how a lot of these NFL teams are crappy at scouting players, and that's why you're like, oh, why did they pick Alex Leatherwood, number 17 overall? That was a... I criticize these picks in real time. No, I'm serious. And that's why I'm not afraid. Really. And this is why I'm not afraid to put my beast analysis or out there, because again, if you're more right than wrong, people are going to gravitate toward it. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but again, if I can do it, so can you. Like, there's a lot of people. I'm not the only one, but yet I'm not the one in those positions to make those power play moves. So when you look at it from an internet standpoint and we Google search anything, right, there are names that I like. All right, so if you're talking about the Chicago Bears, right, the Bears, which by the way, Gale Sayers is one of my favorite all-time players. I think he's a beast. But look at it for what it's worth, right? You look at guys like Omar Khan from the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Because GM Kevin Colbert is now retiring, just like Dave Gettleman from the New York Giants. Right. So you see now a new era, right? People are turning the page, so to speak. Organizations are turning that page. Omar Khan is a number cruncher. And he would be a good find for what the Chicago Bears or any franchise would like to do. I like him. Another name is Brandon Hunt. All right. He's the vice president of player personnel with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he would be a good guy to go after. Adam Peters, and this is biased, but Adam Peters from the San Francisco 49ers would be a really nice pickup. I really think he's in line. He came from the Denver Broncos previously. He would be a good guy to get a GM position. Some name that's not talked about yet, or I haven't heard, is Thomas Dimitroff. Remember? The
Falcons GM, formerly Falcons GM.
There you go. Scott Pioli. I like these guys. Darren Mogi, I like. So there's a lot of guys out there, and Darren Mogi went to San Diego State, so I got to give my Aztec a shout out. But biased, right? But hey, these guys are really good at their jobs, and I think all of these names should be in line for a GM search. Now, you cannot go into it, and that's why the power struggle is so apparent. Look, I worked with Jim Harbaugh, right? So now we're transitioning into the GM coaching dynamic, all right? And I covered Jim Harbaugh, I covered Trent Baalke. It was, I'm telling you, it was toxic going into work every single day. Going into the office and just seeing the toxicity. I mean, it's bad. I was always the first one in and one of the last ones out on numerous occasions. I'd seen a lot of stuff. All right, I never reported. There's a lot of stuff that goes down when there's a rift between GM and head coach. So that's why I think it's very important to select the GM first, because then he will have say in personnel decisions. If you do it the other way around, unless you're a Sean Payton, I would say stay off, because even if I love Jim Harbaugh, Jim, if you're watching this, but there's going to be a power struggle. He's going to want some players drafted, but the GM's going to say, you know what? We did the legwork during the season while you were on the field. Our scouting department, our personnel department knows what we're doing to crunch the numbers, to make it work, to field the best team possible for us to be in the best position to make plays for the personnel that we need. We need this guy. Well, no, man, I want this guy. There's a power struggle there. So if you select the head coach first before the GM, you're going to have a power struggle like you see with Matt Rule, right? Marty Herney was gone, right? Mm-hmm. So you see the dynamic there. And that's why I think before we go ahead and talking about who would be a nice fit for a head coaching position, let's go ahead and solidify the GM and front office first in that scouting department. Because let's be honest, teams are built through the draft, and you complement those players by going into free agency, not overpaying in free agency for players that you know they're going to be playing a price at its peak, right? It's like buying a stock at its high. Why would you want to do that? You wouldn't. You want to find value where you can, and hopefully you can build through the draft. So that's why I think if you're looking at a guy like Jim Harbaugh, who's going to probably want personnel say, I mean, let's be honest. He's not going to go and be like, yeah, I'm going to let the next GM pick all my players for me. He's going to be like, no, man, I just came from Michigan. I know who I faced against. I want this guy. Right. That's what's going to happen. And so to some effect, my opinion, time will tell how that plays out. But I think Jim Harbaugh would be a great pickup for you guys because the guy wins. At the end of the day, that's all we care about, wins and losses. The guy's a winner. And so if you can get Jim Harbaugh before a GM, it only works if that dynamic is able to have that power struggle to where there's an understanding. Hey, look, okay, you can pick the offensive guys, we'll pick the defensive guys, or whatever the case may be. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
Mm-hmm. And it's like that, what you see, especially what you cover. John Lynch came in and says, look, I want to bring in Kyle Shanahan, and it's worked out very well. And it's as you mentioned, they're on the verge of going to perhaps a second Super Bowl after their very first one. So you see how well they work in concert with each other.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. So Ken is a Browns fan, and you covered the Steelers on your website as well, so you probably know a little bit about the Browns. They had a very disappointing season. Obviously, Kevin Stefanski has some work to do this offseason. What are your thoughts on the Browns this past year, and what do they have to do besides obviously maybe bringing in another quarterback to put Mayfield in competition? What do the Browns need to do next year?
That's a great question, right? And that's kind of again peeling back layers of the onion to get to the core. I cover all 32 NFL teams. I grade every single snap of a lot of the different teams. I'm like your one-stop shop, like a PFF, but I just do it myself. So when you look at the Cleveland Browns, they're built for the run, right? I just voted Nick Chubb for the Pro Football Writers Association as a first-team All-Pro, and he got in. So you look at Joe Bitonio, same thing, right? So you have the team built from the inside out, not the outside in, which is very important. I think Andrew Berry's doing a fantastic job in building the team from the inside out, not the outside in. Baker Mayfield, to me, is a player who you live and die with the results. And they've been dying by the results because he's been proven time and time again that he has these inconsistencies in his game. Mm-hmm. When you're going into the playoffs, you can't have that. You need to go into the game knowing, hey, my quarterback is not going to throw an interception in double coverage. My quarterback is not going to try to live to play another down and have a forced fumble, and then the other team gets good field position and they kick a field goal or whatever. There's a 10-point swing, whatever the case may be. Momentum changer. So when you have guy behind center like a Baker Mayfield, you're really taking on the risk of, man, is this guy really the answer? Because you can't blame it on the offensive line. They have one of the best offensive lines in all of football.
Yep.
So you can't blame it on the offensive line. You can't blame it on Odell Beckham Jr. because he's not even there anymore. You have Jarvis Landry there, but okay. But what else? What are you actually doing? Like, for me, I would try to move Baker Mayfield and try to get something in return. Now, there's going to be some kind of value there because I don't know what that value is. But again, I'm pretty sure there's some scout out there and says, you know what, we were really high on Baker Mayfield. He was graded at 95 out of 100, and I really like this guy. And what I heard great things from the Cleveland Browns organization, and so we should try to make a move. This happens all the time, by the way. There's always that one guy. I'm serious. There's always that one guy that says, oh man, like, no, we should really take a risk on this guy. And then the rest of the guys are okay. And like, if you're in a higher enough position, they will go ahead and pull the trigger. I'm not saying Baker Mayfield's going anywhere, but if I was the Cleveland Browns and Andrew Berry, I'd definitely be looking for an alternative plan B because we have seen it time and time again that Baker Mayfield is so inconsistent.
You're 100% on. As a Browns fan, as someone who has lost many body parts to the Brown quarterbacks since Browns 2.0 came in 1998, Ryan. I hear you're absolutely 100% spot on. We definitely need another quarterback.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is Jimmy G the answer in your opinion?
I don't think he's the answer. I'll be 100%. I don't think he's the answer, but I think he does give them the best chance to win today. So it's a two-pronged question. He's the best. It's like the guy you go to work with, right? Like, is the grass always greener on the other side? We have this fresh guy coming out of college, but he doesn't even know, C++ if you're talking about coding, right? This guy doesn't know crap. Like, what the hell? Like, that's a given. Like, you should know that crap, dude. Like, I'm not going to throw you in. Oh, but I know how to do this. And it's like, oh, that's pretty interesting, but you don't know the basics yet. So I think Jimmy Garoppolo gives them the best chance to win today. But when you talk about a 2 to 3 year outlook, that's why they drafted Trey Lance, because Jimmy Garoppolo basically shrinks down their playbook to 4 or 5 plays outside of a inside zone or outside zone.
Right. The Bears fans, we all know with Mitch Trubisky, because Nagy had to pare the playbook so far down because obviously of his limitations. So much. So we started this show, obviously, me and Ken, and I also reached out to you in the earlier infancy, Ryan, if you remember, because obviously of the AAPI racism that spiked during the COVID. You live in San Francisco, which has obviously been a hotbed along with New York. You're Japanese American like I am, and obviously living in San Francisco. How do you cope with it? And then the industry as a whole, obviously, whether it's sports or entertainment, obviously we're still seeing still somewhat skewed. And then obviously you mentioned nepotism and all the other stuff that's have plagued us. The lack of minority hiring in the NFL and other sports, even with the Rooney Rule, doesn't seem to have really done much difference. How do you really feel about, obviously with the sports that you cover, and then, the city that you live in and all that other crap that, our community has dealt with?
You remember when Eugene Chung said that someone told him that he wasn't the right minority?
I remember that, yes.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's just say I heard the same thing, but I'm not going to release who said it or what was said, but I definitely know who said it.
Yeah.
Not to Eugene Chung, but another instance that it occurred. So could be two different incidences with two different people, but that's something that I heard during COVID, believe it or not. And so I think being an Asian American, I'm multi-Asian, by the way. I'm Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, part Native American, Sicilian. So I'm a lot of different things. But it's concerning. It's very concerning because if you look in the NFL, right, how many people in the NFL media are Asian American?
Not many.
Right?
No.
I mean, we can count them on one hand.
Yeah.
Honestly, off the top of our heads, really, truthfully.
Right? Michael Yam, that one person I can think of, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, my boy Mike Yam, right? Yammer from NFL Network. He's an anchor for them. Does a really good job, right? But there's not too many of us, right? So Mike Yam, me, Tim Kawakami.
Yep, right.
From the Athletic.
Yeah, because he's from Chicago, right? Didn't Tim go to Chicago?
I don't know.
But didn't he grow up I thought he grew up in Chicago. Or maybe not grew up in Chicago. I thought he went to school there or something. I thought he has ties to Chicago somewhere. But anyways, there's only a few of us, right?
Yes.
And so, and a few others, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it's really concerning because we are just as qualified as any other, right? But again, it comes down to the whole Asian American Pacific Islander, the hate is real. Like, it's real. Like, I remember when I first started, right? True story. I first started going to these to training camp, right? Getting in with the San Francisco 49ers, and you just feel there's a few people that you just felt the vibe like you don't belong. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like the same feeling when you go into like a different city that's like racist, and all eyes are on you, and you just feel that vibe. You don't have to say anything, but body language and eyes on you, they kind of push you out without trying to push you out. Does that make sense? So I seen that during my time covering the NFL, and not too many people talk about that, but because there's few of us in it, right? So you have to really earn your stripes, and you really have to prove yourself that you belong. Not only do you belong, but you're better than these people. Look, I will put my stuff against anyone, and that's how I went in going with it. I didn't, kiss butt. I did things the hard way, worked my way up organically, right? Work ethic, hustle and grind. Like I said, first one in, last one out. And these are things that was instilled to me by my family, right? By my parents. It's all how you're raised. And so I was always taught, like, you know what? Like they're just because you're different, some people are going to view you as different. But it's your job, because you're in it now, to make the Asian American community proud by going out and sticking to your gun and saying, you know what? I belong. I'm going to get this right. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Not because for any other reason than if you doubt me, I'm going to prove you wrong. It's that beast mentality that I always had as a kid growing up. And again, I'm not the tallest guy. I mean, let's face it. Most Asian Americans are not tall. We're short. I'm only 5'5". You can't tell, but I'm short. Like, I'm vertically challenged, bro. But again, when you try to challenge me, right, and say I can't do or I can or cannot do something, I'm going to prove you wrong 110%. And I will make you look dumb. And so I think that's what we need to do for anyone who's listening is, look, you're always going to have those haters. You're always going to have those doubters for whatever reason may be. Whatever the reason may be. But if you really believe in what you're trying to accomplish and you have the passion, dedication, and drive and work ethic, you're going to get to where you want to be. You're going to get there. It doesn't matter what others think about you, because if they're looking at you for a reason, and that means that you're doing something right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ryan Sakamoto's joining us, and he covers the San Francisco 49ers, has his own show on YouTube, Beast Twitter, as you can see there, his handle. Great stuff, as always. Let's talk a little bit about the NFC Championship. As we talked a little bit earlier, the Niners have the Rams number. Kyle Shanahan seems to outcoach Sean McVay in all the matchups that they've had so far. How do you see this game coming up on Sunday?
It's funny. I was at the gym today. If you guys don't know, like I compete, like I bodybuild for a living. That's like part of my other 9 to 5. So I'm actually going for my pro card right now. So I was actually at the gym, and literally my cousin's like, "Who's gonna win? Rams or Niners? Rams or Niners?" I was like, "Dude, I don't know, man." I was like, "Well, let me throw some stats for you." And I provided some for you guys earlier. The divisional game in the NFC has seen 6 divisional games since 1970 between 2 common opponents within the division. The home team won 5 of those games. So there's a 5-1 home team record. The problem is that's kind of skewed because the Niners travel. And if you guys, I don't know if you guys have been searching the internet, but they've been trying to block tickets. And then Ticketmaster all of a sudden today took that down and said, no, anyone can get it. So is this really a away game or a home game? That's number one. Number two, again, we talked about how Sean McVay is basically a loser against the San Francisco 49ers for the last 6 games. That's something to look forward to. When you talk about scheme and you talk about how one team is going to attack the other, look, it comes down to strength versus weaknesses. The 49ers defensive front 4 is getting home and getting home early. They don't have to bring a blitz. And the Rams offensive line, whenever they face the San Francisco 49ers, the offensive line has gone to crap. Like, they're not very good. Brian Allen's not very good, and he's a center. He gets pushed back 5-7 yards off the line of scrimmage every single time. I mean, you have Eric Armstead that moved from defensive end to defensive tackle. That's why the defense is doing so well. He's a big part of that. But aside from that, Nick Bosa, right, screaming off the edge, Arden Key's getting his. And again, we can name drop players off of a roster any day of the week. But when you can get down organically with a front 4 and get home early, it doesn't matter what kind of weapons you have on the outside because you're not going to make the proper reads or have enough time to make those proper reads. On the flip side of that, the Rams, they're built for this too. I mean, they traded for Matthew Stafford. They traded for Von Miller. They traded for all these weapons like Odell Beckham Jr., right? And so if you're built to win in the playoffs and you purposely went into the season for this exact moment and you fold, that says a lot that you invested all in. And again, they don't have draft picks. They don't have first-round draft picks. You invested all in for this moment, and you still can't beat the San Francisco 49ers that you faced 3 times. So if I was a betting man, I would take the 49ers because until you prove me wrong, Los Angeles Rams, I don't see you're going to win this ball game because at the end of the day, it's a mismatch nightmare. And the Niners are the hottest team in the NFL. I don't think any team in the AFC or the NFC wants to face the 49ers because they're peaking at the right moment. So when you have that and you put that together and it's backed up by a strong defense, backed up by a strong running game that's going to chew up clock time, keeping opposing offenses off the football field, the defense is going to get tired on the other side, and it's going to be a game of catch me if you can. As long as Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't screw it up and throw 2 interceptions or some crazy... That's the wild card. Every game,
That's
it's like...
true. That's absolutely true.
That's true.
Yeah,
He
so
had some
I
terrible
think
throws in the Packers game. That was so scary watching it, you know. So,
the Packers should have won that game.
They-
But
yeah.
I think the Niners are going to win this game. I'm going to go with the Niners. I think they're going to win probably 23-20.
oh, okay. Maybe another Robbie Gold game winner there, huh?
There you go.
There you go. Okay, so before we let you go, we were having conversations with the Harrison earlier about the Bears GM head coaching. You mentioned Omar Khan. We don't know how the interview went. Let's just say if Omar doesn't make the finalist, unfortunately, the names we're hearing are Elliot Wolfe, the son of former legendary executive Ron Wolfe, obviously the nepotism there. Monty Ossenfort, the former Patriots and now Titans executive. Ryan Poles, the Chiefs director of player personnel. And Morocco Brown, who has ties with the Bears in the early 2000s. What do you know about all these 4 men, if you know? And if you had to pick out of those, who do you think would be the favorite?
I think Elliot Wolfe would be the favorite.
Oh, okay. That's a pretty juicy headline. Former Packer executive coming to work for the Bears and kick the Packers' ass or something like that.
Yeah. I think Elliot Wolfe would be yeah. I mean, look, the reaction you guys got out of it was right.
Right,
what you guys
because he said he left the Packers. He didn't get picked for the Packers job. Obviously, certainly nepotism didn't play a role there. He went to the Browns and then the Patriots. He took a hard road, so obviously it's an interesting choice. I know a lot of fans, myself included, we'd be like yay, or people be like this, no matter who we pick. Whether it's a GM or head coach for that matter.
I would like to see Thomas Dimitroff. I like Thomas Dimitroff. I just think he should be a GM. There's a lot of GMs out there who are horrible. I think Thomas Dimitroff is one of the better ones. I really do. So, yeah.
Well, Ryan Sakamoto, this is some of the stuff that you get on his YouTube channel and on his Twitter page. Fascinating stuff. Ryan, we thank you so much for joining us tonight and also talking about the experience of being a member of the AAIPI community, especially in the Bay Area, and coming into the NFL. We appreciate it. We thank you for coming on, and we'll definitely have you on again.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. You guys are awesome, and anytime you guys want me back, I'm all for you guys.
We definitely will have you back. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. And the AA team will wrap up the segment as we'll talk about the weekend in the NFL, which was absolutely fantastic. We'll talk about that coming up next on the AA team.
I listened on talk radio today, and people, well, they got to bring in a football czar over the general manager. Well, then the general manager isn't the general manager.
Exactly.
Okay, then your football czar is the GM, and now you're paying 2 people to do the exact same thing. Hey, when I worked there, Jerry was the general manager.
Mm-hmm.
I ran the college scouting. Bobby DePaul ran the pro scouting. We didn't have a director of player personnel.
Mm-hmm.
We kept it simple. And the pro scouts didn't get involved in college. I did get involved in some pro, and it's only if they want another opinion on a guy we may sign as free agency. And I'd watch tape, and it was only if it was asked to me. Have that football czar. That is not going to do a damn thing on the playing field. It's going to cost you another few $1 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it might make talk radio feel a little better. Oh, they got a football czar. It doesn't mean shit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, get the right guy to hold the GM job.
Back on the AA team, and we thank our guests Harrison Graham and Ryan Sakamoto talking about the NFL and the Bears GM search, and also talking about the San Francisco 49ers. Steven, some great stuff from both of them tonight.
Oh, it was tremendous. Harrison obviously brought some knowledge as a chat sport host. I think a lot of people follow him, and if they haven't already, they should follow him for the Daily Bears Report on YouTube. And I tell you, Ryan was terrific. He brought so much knowledge from having worked inside the 49ers, and also brought tremendous enthusiasm. And I hope that the Bears fans will follow him for not just the 49ers and Bears on his Twitter and YouTube channel going forward.
Yeah, Ryan definitely brought the heat tonight, and we always appreciate people who bring heat. I think any show appreciates guests that bring heat on their show. Steven, what a fantastic weekend in the NFL for the playoffs, divisional weekend. All 4 games, walk-off wins, 3 road teams coming in. Buffalo should have won, with the exception of some mental lapse of not squib kicking the kickoff with 13 seconds left, allowing Patrick Mahomes 2 passes to get down from the 25-yard line all the way down to the opposite 25 to get a kick, 35. Other than that, it would have been 4 road teams to win. And I don't think we've ever had that 4 road teams sweep the divisional playoff weekend. But what a fantastic weekend, and it's the reason why we love the NFL so much.
Oh, absolutely. That game you're talking about in the end, it was no gimme because Harrison Buckner missed a PAT and a field goal earlier.
Yep.
So that did cross my mind, and I'm like, oh my God, that missed PAT is going to come back to haunt the Chiefs, because it would have been a 2-point game instead of a 3. That would have been a game winner.
Yep.
And we wouldn't have gone to the overtime, but obviously having that game go into overtime, and obviously the game ended on the Chiefs walk-off. So it certainly leaves a lot to be desired if you're Buffalo fans, and I think a lot of people will be asking or clamoring about the NFL OT rule again.
Yeah.
But like you said, all 4 games were terrific. The Bengals, walk-off field goal by a rookie.
Yep.
Steve Tannehill, obviously. I'm sorry, Ryan Tannehill, obviously proved that he's not maybe the championship quarterback. Maybe probably more close to Jimmy G level, perhaps. The 49ers, Packers. Obviously, a lot of Bears fans are happy that the Packers lost. Yeah. And now we wait the future of Aaron Rodgers, which Packers fans are so used to it with the, Brett Favre retiring. We shall see where he goes. The Packers have a serious cap issues. Right now, they're over 50 plus. They have to clear 70 million just to maybe tag Devontae Adams at 20. So we shall see. A lot of players, without Rodgers, what's the point of sticking around playing in the small market like the Packers? So there's a lot of questions that the Packers have to answer. We the Bears can obviously, cheer on about it, but the Packers obviously have won more share of big games than the Bears fans have ever experienced. And the Bears have to really nail their GMs and the head coach search, so that we can finally be on par with the Packers. This is a great opportunity for the Bears now. And even if the Packers bring back Aaron Rodgers for one more year, the Bears have to slay the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. That would probably make it more meaningful, I know, in the eyes of many people. But listen, whatever happens, Bears have to do their part and nail the GM and the head coach. And the Rams and the Tampa Bay. I thought that game was long over, but Rams shot themselves in the foot with several fumble turnovers. Brady nearly pulled it off, but obviously Todd Bowles made a questionable decision with an all-out blitz on the next to last play, and I think he might have killed his head coaching candidacy along with Leslie Frazier. Both men have serious questions to ask about their decision on both games. So we shall see with Tom Brady. He sounded probably for the first time he was really thinking about retirement for a change. And Bruce Arians says he's coming back. Will Arians be able to convince Tom Brady one more year? We'll do this one more time, and then we'll put it all in. And the next week's game obviously brings a lot of intrigue. 49ers, Rams. I know Ryan was very bullish on the 49ers for very good reasons. And I think the Rams might pull it off because they have so much invested in it. Obviously playing Super Bowl in their home stadium will be a tremendous motivation. You don't need any motivation than that.
Right.
But,
they would become the second team in a row to play the Super Bowl in the home stadium. Of course, Tampa Bay did that last year. They had limited amount of people in that game, and it looks like they probably will have a full stadium if the Rams make it. I mean, the Super Bowl is going to have a full stadium no matter what. But I have a feeling that there'll be more Rams fans for that game if LA manages to pull off the win in the NFC Championship. We are going to be coming back in a couple of weeks, so let's make our picks for the who's going to be in the Super Bowl, Stephen, because let's do that now. AFC Championship, Cincinnati at Kansas City. Who do you like?
Boy, Mahomes versus Burrow. This is going to be a very good game.
Yeah.
Neither team is exactly, doesn't have a great defense. I think it will be a high-scoring game. Whoever has the ball in the end. Chiefs are the champs. So I'm going to go with Chiefs still until they can, until Joe Burrow can prove otherwise. It will be high-scoring game. Like I said, it will be probably 42-38. And then for the NFC, I'll go with the Rams. Probably more of a, defensive struggle. 27-24 Rams. Ken, your pick?
I'll go contrary because those are the two teams I was going to pick. So just for the sake of argument, I will go with the trilogy, the Super Bowl trilogy of Cincinnati and San Francisco. They played twice before. Both times San Francisco won, and we'll make our Super Bowl picks the week of the Super Bowl because that is when we will be returning. Will be the Super Bowl week, and we're going to have some very fun guests for that as well. We aren't going to announce it yet because we still want to make sure we finalize everything. But Steven's been doing yeoman's work and getting all our guests for the AA team since we began back in September of last year. But it's going to be a fun week. Wild card weekend was horrible. Divisional weekend certainly more than made up for it. And let's hope that the conference championship weekend on Sunday will be absolutely two fantastic games. And we'll, of course, handicap the Super Bowl when it comes up, Stephen.
Absolutely. We'll be back on the 7th of February. And, we're working on a great guest as always. And we hope to have you come back for another episode of the AA team.
That's that. Absolutely. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. For Stephen Negishi, I'm Ken Fang. For our producer and director, Aldo, we'd like to thank you for watching us tonight and throughout the next couple of weeks until we come back in next month. I'm Ken Fang. He's Stephen Negishi. Thanks for watching us. We'll see you next time on the AA team on the Barroom Network.